But that's not the only reason they want to clobber the poor, for Mulvaney sees himself as the wrathful enforcer of the holy work ethic, a Dickensian character whose job it is to punish the poor for being, in his view, a morally bankrupt class of slothful moochers. The Trump budget is all about compassion, he declaims, explaining that it shows compassion for the poor by compelling them to get a job in order to end their so-called shame of accepting public assistance, rather than, quote, taking charge of their own lives. Never mind that most able-bodied adults getting poverty aid already work or are looking for a job. Mulvaney mindlessly barks, "We need people to go to work." This is Jim Hightower saying, "No, Mick, we need you to go get a clue about the harsh realities of living in poverty, including having to endure constant condescension from judgmental jerks like you who smugly condemn a food stamp family while drawing a six-figure salary from taxpayers, health coverage, pension, and a chauffeured limousine. Congratulations, you're the awfulest of the awful."
Hightower's commentaries are brought to you by the Hightower Lowdown, the monthly newsletter with Hightower's take on what Wall Street and Washington are up to. For information, visit hightowerlowdown.org.
There is no other agency like the EPA. It should really be renamed the Job-Killing Organization of America.
Cause, brothers, it's a fact. If we take and don't put back, they'll have to pay for all we did. So let's leave some blue up above us. Let's leave some green on the ground. It's only as tomorrow. Let's save some for tomorrow. We didn't pass it on.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. So hurricane season began on the 1st of June. And according to the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, this is going to be a whopper of a year. They expect to see hurricanes ranging in the, higher hurricanes, about 5 to 9 of them, likely in the Atlantic, that, could cause us real problems. And, look, we're vulnerable anyway. And now you've got an administration who, there are hundreds, if not thousands of jobs and leadership positions that haven't been filled. And you look at, and again, you go back to the two agencies that protect our coastlines. The National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration and the Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA. They don't have people heading them up, nothing. And it doesn't appear as though there's been anyone that's been appointed. The Senate certainly hasn't confirmed anyone. And when you look at the reality, it should, as U.S. Lieutenant General Russell Honor says, this should scare the hell out of everybody. These positions help save lives. Now, understand, he was one of the guys who played a leadership role during the Joint Task Force during Katrina. He coordinated the military relief part of it. And you go, you know what? Hey, go play golf. Go play golf. No big deal. How hard can it be? How hard can being president be? I mean, this is the frustrating stuff in all this. I mean, the right wing gets, their wet dream list of, hey, we're going to repeal all of these regulations. We're going to get rid of all of these agencies. We don't need them. Job killers. You look the other day in Wisconsin. A corn processing plant exploded in Wisconsin, killing 3 workers. And they say, it was a tragic accident. It was all of this stuff. Here's the reality. The reality is we know dust, silica dust, we know corn dust, sugar dust, wood dust. We know that stuff is flammable. We know it's explosive. We know it. And yet here these 3 people are, and look, they've worked for years in this grain mill. What we know is that explosions from dust are preventable. We know that. We do that through regulation. We do that through mandating that facilities upgrade and that they keep their ventilation systems in proper working order. We know this stuff. But yet, Again, what's it going to take? 150 years for OSHA to inspect every workplace in the country? And it goes back to what I've been saying for a very long period of time. If we're going to, honestly, this is one of those moments, if we're going to continue to gut and cut regulations, who's going to pay the price? I've said for years, if I ever wanted to kill somebody, I'd just give them a job. Because it certainly seems that we don't really care all that much about those folks who are working. And that's kind of a frustrating part for me. It's infuriating. Also, the national I stop and I think about this. And we've been talking about dust for years on the program. We've been talking about all of these situations where we've allowed companies to dictate regulations. We've allowed the regulatory bodies to be overrun by corporate flacks. We've done this stuff for years. There's a swinging door between regulators and industry. And you hear these, especially in the coal mines, you hear these stories of how, the regulators are going back and forth between industry, and they don't want to take anybody off. So we're not going to hold anybody really accountable. We'll just around the edges. Because the hope is that, once an opening ends up in industry, I can go double or triple my salary. So we don't want to tick anybody off by regulating. We don't want to tick anyone off by doing the job. And look, understand, there have only been a handful of explosions in this country with dust. But there's still a handful too many. And I'll tell you, it's angering and it's frustrating. And you look at these dangerous environments that we allow to happen in this country. Just angering. Also, if you want to get involved, I highly suggest right now the opportunity to weigh in on the idea that the Trump administration has come up with, which is to privatize our air traffic control system. Again, today the big infrastructure plan is supposed to be somewhat rolled out in front of us, which, during the campaign, he said it was going to be $1 trillion. It's really about $200 billion of federal money. The rest, they're hoping, comes from the private sector. They're hoping to have payday loans for infrastructure. And again, this is a way to fund infrastructure without having to pay taxes up front on it and then privatize that infrastructure. Understand, it's going to cost money. The question is who benefits from the cost? New York City desperately needs another tunnel. Desperately. If you've gone through the Lincoln or the Holland or you've tried to get in and out of that city, it's, especially at rush hour, forget it. Every time I go, it's like, I'll go have dinner somewhere and I'll wait 2 or 3 hours just to avoid the hassle of waiting in traffic. But you have governors like Christie who refuses to do anything to build another tunnel that they desperately need. That in this country, infrastructure is something we desperately need. Public transportation to get in and out of the city, desperately in need. But we're not going to do that. What we're going to do is we're going to pursue what is the most profitable path for Wall Street, for investors. And, if we benefit from it, it happens. It's really about the money. And what's scary to me is I keep hearing people going, Donald Trump's got a new idea. No, it's not a new idea. It's an old idea, and it's a bad idea. We've seen this movie before, and it didn't work. So to say that, the magic of Wall Street is going to save us is a bit ludicrous. And not just a bit ludicrous, it's completely ludicrous. I mean, understand the world we're moving towards, and it's coming. It doesn't take a genius to figure it out. You don't need a crystal ball. You don't need to be clairvoyant. You don't need to have a seance and ask the dead. We know what's coming. And that's going to be a cash box on every corner. And in this day and age, it's not going to be someone who has a job either who's standing there with their hand out. No. You're just going to have an easy pass. And every time you pass through one, it's going to be cha-ching, cha-ching, cha-ching everywhere you go. That's the future of our infrastructure. If you want to walk across the street, it's going to cost you. If you want to drive across town, it's going to cost you. If you want to go to another state, oh, is it ever going to cost you? This is the future. Now, our grandparents' generation said, no, we want to have infrastructure that, we can move freely across this country. That's good for business. That's good for the economy. That's good for families. That's good for, people getting back and forth to work, going on vacation, whatever. And, from Eisenhower's military perspective, a good way to drive bombs around. Today, what's that vision? The vision is how much money we can make off of it. And someone hit me the other day with, well, you said you wanted the bridge to nowhere. And I said, yeah, because I know that eventually the bridge to nowhere leads to somewhere. That's how you open up new areas. That's how you find places for communities to grow. I've been saying for a long time, well, we need a high density living. How do we get that? By putting in public transportation. So people don't need to live in the suburbs. They can live in a high density development area. They can get on the train. They can have all the things they need within walking distance. And that's how you grow that. And you start that with public transit. You start that by building the lines. We've done this, and a lot of people, would remember learning about the railroads. Every time the railroads stopped somewhere, it sprung up a new town. And people came, and industries built, and business thrived. And it seemed to almost work a little bit. It seemed somewhat sane and rational. Problem is we've lost sane and rational. We threw them off the boat a long time ago. What we've got now are hooray for me and the heck with everybody else. And the question is, how long will we put up with it? How long are we going to allow that mentality to continue? I don't know. And I'm fearful what the future looks like for my kids because, you go to some of these conservative sites these states where, everything costs something. You want to go to a park? You're going to have to pay. There's an admission cost. You want to go to a museum? There's an admission cost. You want to go to a library? Got to be a member. You name it. Your subscription rates, all this stuff. That's coming. That's the future. And now put that with the fact that there aren't going to be a lot of jobs around, and you go, who's going to be able to afford that? Who's going to be able to afford what is coming? Certainly not you and me. Scary, scary stuff, my friends. Anyway, I'd love to hear your thoughts, questions, comments. Rick at thericksmithshow.com. I'm going to take a quick break. When we come back, I'm going to talk with our good friend Andrea Chalupa about the weekend's event, and it was, honestly, it was beyond my expectations. When it started out, there were a handful of people who trickled in, and then it was like, bang, there were thousands. And these people were passionate. These people were organized. And these people were ready. It is what we need, and we need it now. Quick break, right back with Andrea Chalupa. Stick around. This is The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
Radio of, for, and by we the working people. The Rick Smith Show.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to thericksmithshow.com. If you've missed any portion of the program, you can download the podcast at thericksmithshow.com.
You're listening to WIN, Workers Independent News, a diversified media enterprises production. I'm Doug Cunningham. California is making progress toward a Medicare for All law. The California Senate voted to approve the bill and send it to the California Assembly. California Nurses Association, National Nurses United, is a big backer of the single-payer Medicare-style system that would cover all Californians. To become law, SB 562 must pass the Assembly, get reconciled between the two houses of the California legislature, and also get Governor Jerry Brown's signature. At least 8 members of the Assembly earlier co-sponsoring the bill. Roseanne DeMauro, executive director of the California Nurses Association, National Nurses United, says that passage in the Senate was a banner day for California and a moral model for the nation on universal single-payer health care. A team of economists at the Political Economy Research Institute at the University of Massachusetts Amherst studied the economic impact of this Medicare for All bill in California and found that it would cut the out-of-pocket health care costs of middle-income California families by as much as 9%. Business would also benefit from cuts in payroll costs under the bill. The AFL-CIO says pulling out of the Paris Climate Agreement is a decision to abandon a cleaner future powered by good jobs. AFL-CIO President Rich Trumka says it's a failure of American leadership. SEIU President Mary Kay Henry says Trump's decision to take the U.S. out of the Paris Climate Accord won't stop working Americans from pushing for progress on climate change. Henry said by withdrawing from the Paris Climate Agreement, President Trump and his self-interested political allies are killing the creation of new industries and jobs that could give communities the boost they need to thrive in favor of corporate polluters who want to pad their bottom line on the health of our communities. United Steelworkers President Leo Gerard says President Trump's decision to withdraw from the Paris Agreement is an inexcusable blow to the U.S. economy and signals to domestic innovators and manufacturers that the U.S. will not support them. WIN's Joanne Powers has more labor news.
Donald Trump's proposed budget makes unprecedented cuts that would shift a huge amount of federal spending responsibility onto the states, including a quarter of the cost of the National Food Stamps program for needy families and cuts of up to $1.3 trillion to Medicaid. John Peacock is project director of the Wisconsin Budget Project.
He proposes massive cuts to Medicaid in order basically to fund huge tax cuts for corporations and the very wealthy.
These cuts are incentivizing states to cut services for low-income citizens. Wisconsin Governor Scott Walker and the Republican majority in the state legislature are proposing several changes to the state's Medicaid program.
Childless adults who make at least $200 a month would have to pay a premium, having drug testing, and putting a 4-year time limit. Actually, a number of those things would cost more, at least in the short run, because of the amount of bureaucracy involved in making those changes.
WIN is made possible in part by the OPEIU, the Office and Professional Employees International Union. You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit laborradio.org.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. Questions, comments, something on your mind, you can email me, Rick, at thericksmithshow.com. What a weekend it was in the Big Apple. And, look, I went to New York City for the March for Truth, figuring, maybe a couple hundred people would show up. It would be a nice showing. It would be, the most hardcore, hardened activists. Wow, was I shocked, amazed, surprised, but delighted by the fact there were thousands of people who filled the streets in what was just an amazing day. And here to talk about the weekend, I've asked one of the organizers of the March for Truth, Andrea Chalupa, to come talk with us. Andrea, thanks for taking time for us.
Thank you so much, and thanks for joining us in New York.
It was fantastic, and good on you for putting together what, I'm saying was just an amazing event. Could you have imagined it would be as big as it was? I mean, it was, in my mind, it was enormous.
It was pretty incredible. I mean, our stretch goal was just a few hundred people. We just wanted to gather together and make a public statement. We actually, exactly a month ago, Justin Hendricks, Jordan Ewell, the three of us that, launched this thing, along with Olga Lotman and others on Twitter, the three of us, Justin, Jordan, and I, spent 3 hours on the phone exactly a month ago trying to talk ourselves out of doing March for Truth. We loved the idea, but we had never done a march before. We did not know where to start. We also felt like we didn't have enough time. And finally, we just felt like, you know what, this is about our democracy being at stake. This is about our national sovereignty being at stake. This is about supporting our allies and fighting for America's place in the world as a leader, and not succumbing to the chaos of Trump and Putin's agenda. And so we went for it. We took a big leap of faith, and there was a lot of people there who caught us and joined us, and it went viral right away. And we are just so incredibly overwhelmed and grateful of the remarkable nationwide turnout.
Well, I got to be honest, it didn't look like you didn't know what you're doing because it came off, in my view, without a hitch. And look, at the end of it, it was about the message, which was, to me, very clear. We want transparency. We want to know what happened in 2016. We want to know if our president and Russia were colluding. We need to know. And I think that was very, across the board, was the message everyone was out there to send.
Absolutely. And you see that today with what happened with Trump's NATO speech. All of the adults in the room, McMaster and Mattis, obviously urged and pushed him to put in his NATO speech America's support for Article 5, which says if any NATO partner is attacked, all of us are going to act like we were attacked and join together and have a swift response to that aggression. And that's very important because you have small states like the Baltics and Poland right up against the Russia's aggression. And that's been in the news for years with, Russia, recently kidnapping an Estonian security agent, holding him for ransom as a political prisoner. So Article 5 is very, very, very important in putting that barrier up against Russia and having a united front. And for Trump personally to erase any mention of America's support for Article 5 in his NATO speech, my God, that Putin wins. So we're so grateful that we had this March for Truth and that people stood up and said, we want our country back. We want to find out what's the real relationship between Trump and Putin's mafia state.
I was surprised. There was one Trump supporter who showed up at the March for Truth, and he was honest. And, I give him credit for at least being honest in what he believes. And he said, look, I don't care if Russia was involved. Donald Trump won, you lost, get over it. And I kept going back, are you sure about that? Are you sure that you don't care what Russia did? And surprisingly, I keep getting that kind of statement coming from supporters of Trump, that they don't really care if Trump and Putin colluded on winning the presidency. They won.
And now they want to shove their far-right agenda down our throats and have, and let's remember, he won the Electoral College, which is based on a slave system, a brutal, inhumane slave system. So the Electoral College, that has to go. So that alone, removing that deserves its own movement. But he lost the popular vote, and yet he's not making any room in his agenda for the rest of America. It's just this very narrow, hate-driven, anti-fact-driven, anti-science, anti-woman agenda that he's now shoving down our throats in a very inhumane, un-American way.
So now that we've had this big march, and again, they were all over the country. I know here in Harrisburg, they had a very impressive march. Now that this is over, the weekend is over, and everyone's going, wow, it was amazing. We saw all these people, it was great images, all of that. Where from here?
Well, yeah, so it was a huge turnout. We're the top story on AP, NPR, tons of press coverage. MSNBC was running with the story all day. So what's up next for March for Truth? We stand on the shoulder of giants, obviously, Indivisible, Move On, Women's March, Town Hall Project. All these essential organizations have built, this wonderful political infrastructure. And then March for Truth came in and built a political infrastructure with them that unites Americans across the country who care deeply about Trump and Russia, and they want to get answers. So we're going to continue to stay in contact with these key organizers across the country, including in red states, and make sure that Russiagate is a major talking point of the 2018 election, the 2020 election. We're going to name and shame Republicans who stand in the way of Americans getting the truth. That's essential because we don't want to become Putin's Russia. We don't want to become a mafia state of unimaginable corruption. We don't want Ivanka Trump being handed the keys to the White House after her father leaves automatically. We want the rule of law. We want democracy. We want accountability. We want transparency. And right now we have a president who is elected by the massive help of a hostile regime who is really putting our system of checks and balances to the test. And we need to get rid of him and his party and everybody who's supporting his hate-filled agenda. So we're going to really make sure that Americans understand, voters understand in 2018, 2020, that what the choice is that, do you want to live in a kleptocracy like Putin's Russia? It's a simple answer, yes or no, 2018 and 2020.
Yeah, but some would argue, Andrea, that we already live in that kleptocracy. I mean, you look at what these Wall Street criminals get away with, and we're already there almost, right? I mean, thoughts?
Absolutely, but the thing is, people in the West don't know just how bad it can be, and it can be a lot worse. We're actually a paradise compared to Putin's Russia, Putin's mafia state. It can be a lot worse, and people have to really think right now in the resistance long term. They may see these demonstrations happening. They may see people very engaged this year, next year, but Putin took time to really turn Russia into a prison. And so we have to be on guard. We have to remain active, engaged citizens from now until we die. Like, that's our role now. That's part of our social lives, the air we breathe, the media we consume. It all has to be there. The spirit has to stay alive, because this is a very critical 10, 15, 20 years in the world and in America. Democracy is on the decline. So we here as Americans are on the forefront in making sure that America does not fall further down into that black hole of kleptocracy, because we might not be able to come out for generations.
Let me ask you this. What do you say to the person who says, we live in a political climate that a fair investigation isn't possible? There's no way that we're ever going to find anyone who's independent. We're not going to find anyone who can look at the facts and judge them for what they are, just move on.
That's certainly true on the House side. I mean, the Senate side's a little bit better. But the reality is you have to keep naming and shaming. You have to keep confronting them, because that embarrasses them. That puts them on the defensive. This is the Republican Party. This is the party that used to pride itself of being the party of Reagan. And now it's in a complete 180, and it's become Reagan's worst nightmare. So by forcing this conversation, by showing up to town halls, by making calls, by going to demonstrations, by tweeting, by sharing these news articles of all these bombshells on Trump and Russia that keep coming out, you're really putting Republicans on the ropes and embarrassing them and saying, you know what, you're no longer like your hero Reagan. You're far from it. So you have to just get in their faces with it and just shame them.
I mean, it's interesting. I mean, and just in a very short period of time, and we're talking less than 30 years, that we've gone from, or at least there are some, and they tend to be in one political party, who have gone, we like the Russians better than we like our neighbors.
Yeah. I mean, let them go live in Russia. Let them go see what it's like and how the people are living there in many parts of the country. And let's see what they say then.
But here's the thing. How much of it is that we don't really know anyone outside of our little bubble? I mean, we've become this kind of isolated country to where we've been told for so long that we're exceptional, that we're number one, that, everything revolves around us. But there's part of me that thinks that there are those who find it impossible to believe that we've been duped by the Russians, because we've been told for so long that we're far superior to their leadership and we're better than they are.
Yeah, I mean, that arrogance is what made us vulnerable. As I've mentioned on your show before, Ukraine is a laboratory of Russia's aggression. Ukraine has experienced the infiltration and cyber attacks that America experienced in the 2016 election. And Ukraine was much better in resisting the cyber attacks that literally tried to change the outcome of a presidential election. Like the hackers went in to change the outcome of Ukraine's presidential election, and Ukraine was able to catch that and resist it because they knew who they were dealing with. Meanwhile, in America, we don't care. Largely, American voters don't care about foreign policy. We have a hard time. Our stereotype is that we have a hard time with geography and history. And the reality is, if you ignore the rest of the world, if you ignore history, it's only going to catch up with you, as it did in the 2016 election, where Americans were completely blindsided by Putin's aggression.
Yeah, it's interesting times we live in. But again, look, a fantastic event this weekend, amazing event. And I look forward to, as this continues, because I'm sure we're not going away, you'll come back and you'll share with us what's going on.
Absolutely. We're not going away.
Andrea, I appreciate the time. Thanks so much, and congratulations again. An amazing event.
Thank you, Rick.
Great talk with you, Andrea Chalupa. If you want to check out their website, we'll get a link at thericksmithshow.com. Check out marchfortruth.info. We'll get a link there at thericksmithshow.com. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. This is The Rick Smith Show for working people. Come to talk. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1947. That was the day that Secretary of State George Marshall delivered a speech at Harvard University. In his speech, Marshall made a call for the United States to send assistance to European countries devastated by World War II. He declared, quote, "The truth of the matter is that Europe's requirements for the next 3 or 4 years of foreign food and other essential products, principally from America, are so much greater than her present ability to pay that she must have substantial additional help or face economic, social, and political deterioration of a very grave character." His speech became the basis for the European Recovery Program, or what became known as the Marshall Plan. The goal of the plan was to boost the morale of the Europeans, while strengthening trade ties between the U.S. and Europe. There was great fear among leaders in the United States that economic instability would cause European countries to turn towards communism. Through the Marshall Plan, the United States sent aid in the form of grants, loans, and technical assistance. Much of the money went to purchase food and manufactured goods produced in the United States and sent to Europe. This demand helped to keep the American economy booming. In all, more than $13 billion in aid was sent to 16 European countries. Some European labor unions objected to American intervention in Europe as part of the plan. This caused contention between different European labor organizations. As some unions affiliated more closely with the communists, others aligned themselves with the West. The Cold War had taken its toll on labor solidarity. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com.
Chances are, when you took a shower this morning, an AFSCME member made sure that water was clean. When you drove to work, an AFSCME member maintained the road. When you rode an elevator, an AFSCME member inspected it. I'm David Philman, Executive Director of AFSCME Council 13, the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees. AFSCME members enforce regulations, keep prisoners behind bars, take care of patients, protect the environment, and more. The work isn't glamorous, the salaries aren't high, but AFSCME members serve the public in every aspect of our daily lives. Chances are, you'll never see that AFSCME member working in a sewage plant, diving underwater to repair a bridge, or answering a 911 call. But aren't you glad they do? For more information, visit AFSCME13.org. We are AFSCME. We make Pennsylvania happen!
Waving the flag of freedom for people, not corporations. Rick Smith.
Quote of the day from former Secretary of State John Kerry, who said, when Donald Trump says to the world, well, we're gonna negotiate a better deal. I mean, he's gonna go out and find a better deal. That's like O.J. Simpson saying he's going to go out and find the real killer. And yeah, I guess that's about the same thing. That Donald's gonna go out there and he's gonna do something, and that's gonna wow. Here's another one of those moments where this is not normal. And listen, Republican friends, this is not normal. Let me repeat that. Not normal. Politico reported on Friday that the White House has ordered all of the agencies to basically ignore all of the Democrats' oversight requests. Let me repeat that because I think it's really important. All of those freedom of information requests, all of those information requests that lawmakers may have for oversight purposes, no. Sorry. In fact, what they're doing is going through whitehouse.gov and basically wiping out any information. So any documents, any information, any stuff that you might want to know, all gone. And again, I go back to that book I read in high school, 1984, which again, back on the bestseller list for a bit because, we want to see what the playbook is. It was always about continually rewriting history. There was nothing that was, this is what it was, this is how it was. It's all been rewritten. And you saw this for years. You've been seeing this for years as conservative authors and conservative pundits have been rewriting moments in history. You go back to Glenn Beck writing, about George Washington. You go back to, Bill O'Reilly writing about, a whole bunch of things throughout history. And again, spinning it to fit their ideological aim. Thomas Jefferson, one of the most quoted people on both sides of the aisle. And I should say not quoted, but misquoted. This is the kind of stuff that scares me because this is not normal. A government of, for, and by we the people does not create an environment where they don't allow people to see information. And the more you look at this, the more you wonder, why are Trump's numbers so bad? In fact, his highest approval rating to date has been 45%. Most of the time he's in the low 40s, high 30s. On May 28th, Gallup put his job approval numbers at 42%. And since then, it's been going down because on June 3rd, the numbers were down to 36%. And you go, wow, at some point, do we not say that this guy is completely incompetent? I mean, you go back to June of 2009. George W. Bush was, President Obama was 61%. In 2001, George W. Bush was at 55%. Now, understand, George W. Bush won an election because the Supreme Court handed it to him. I don't know a lot of people who think that he won fair and square. It was a Supreme Court anointment. And yet 55% of the people said, yeah, I approve of what he's doing. I mean, it's really it's really kind of scary stuff. Now, I look at this past weekend and I met, had conversations with hundreds of people who they're passionate about the future of this nation. And I met a number of Republicans in line who were saying, look, I didn't vote for him, but I didn't vote for her either. This is not about party. This is not about ideology. This is about moving the country forward in a way that maintains the democratic process, that maintains our belief that we control the destiny of this country. And the fact that there are those like me who are saying, I want to know what coordination happened between the Russian government and the Trump campaign. Because as I've said on this program a number of times, it was the open secret during the conventions. It really was. And it was one of those things that, I was standing there literally going, I don't understand why this isn't national news. I don't understand why this isn't plastered all over CNN, all over the New York Times. Why isn't it there? And the reality is, and I've had people explain it, is it was so incredulous. It was so hard to believe at the moment that the Russian government would be so overt, would be doing this stuff in basically in the light of day and rubbing our nose in it, and that we would put up with it. It was such a, and again, it's another one of these moments where even the New York Times are going, we know what's going on, but it seems like such a fantastical story that no one would believe it. It would be like one of those bad 1980s, Russian U.S. movies that, the spy movies of all of the espionage and all the nonsense going on that nobody believed was possible. But there they were. And I go back to and why I believed it. Because, I remember as a kid, my grandmother would ask me, so what'd you do today? And I would tell her the honest, absolute truth of all of the juvenile delinquent things that I did. And she wouldn't believe a word of it. No, you're just, it's truth. It's the same thing. We didn't want to believe the truth that was hitting us right between the eyes. The question is now, will we believe it? Will we demand this investigation? Will we demand answers? And again, I go back to the election. How is it possible that we allowed him to get away with not showing the tax returns? Something that has been, in my lifetime anyway, a mandate. Something that voters just 10 years ago would have never tolerated. I got to be honest. There is a lot of very scary stuff going on, which is why we absolutely need this. And I go back to my conversation with the Trump supporter, who everything came back to Hillary. And look, and as I've said this 100 times. If Hillary committed crimes, we lock her up. Any politician, I don't care who you are. Our democratic process, the rule of law, is that important. It doesn't matter who you are. You should be held accountable like anybody else. Nobody is above the law. Nobody. And yet, at every turn, you point out a fact about the Trump administration. They fired Comey. And you go, all indication is, and we're going to find out this week as Comey testifies, all indications are that Trump tried to strong-arm him, which is clearly obstruction of justice. You and I would go to jail for it. They kind of poo-poo that off as going, well, Hillary, Bill Clinton, again, investigate. Because I have this belief that either Bill and Hillary Clinton are the best criminals since Bonnie and Clyde, or, they didn't actually do anything that was illegal. I mean, all of the crimes that they've been accused of committing. I remember during the 90s, people were saying, Bill Clinton was sneaking out of the White House and shooting Vince Foster in the back of the head. And I'm going, really? You believe that? And yeah, really. And now with this Seth Rich situation, I actually had someone tell me that it was Bill Clinton again. I'm going, wow, Bill's a prolific hitman. If I ever want someone shot, maybe I just had Bill Clinton do it. All of the crimes that they've been accused of committing, and not one conviction. I mean, John Gotti got at least one. Al Capone, tax evasion, they got him. The Clintons, nothing. So the Teflon Dons got nothing on the Clintons. But it's not about that. It's about the distraction. Because it's easy to go, well, what about? No, what about what's in front of us? The future of this country, Hillary's out. She's done. She's not leading anything. She's not even leading a Girl Scout pack to the zoo. This guy's leading the most powerful nation in history into our oblivion. Scary, scary times. Going to take a quick break. When we come back, going to talk a little bit about there's been, an event going on at Yale University. The graduate students there want to organize a union. They believe that they have the right to collective bargaining, that they should have the right to a decent wage, to some bit of security and, well, a say in what they do. And I don't think it's too outrageous. So when we come back, we're going to talk a little bit about that. Quick break. Right back. Stick around.
From the basement, our government race, we represent it.
to The Rick Smith Show.
As of today, the United States will cease all implementation of the non-binding Paris Accord and the draconian financial and economic burdens the agreement imposes on our country.
Green News Report special coverage. Au revoir, Paris. Donald Trump withdraws the U.S. from the historic Paris Climate Agreement.
That amazing story and more straight ahead. From BradBlog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
At what point do they start laughing at us as a country?
I'd say now. This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, an historic day concerning an historic accord and an historic speech that took place just moments ago before airtime by Donald Trump in the White House Rose Garden.
Yes, that's right. On Thursday afternoon, President Donald Trump, who famously called climate change a hoax invented by China, announced that he is sticking with his campaign promise to withdraw the United States from the United Nations Paris Agreement on Climate Change, the landmark global agreement signed in 2015 by 192 nations to cut the carbon emissions that cause dangerous global warming.
The United States will withdraw from the Paris Climate Accord Thank you. But begin negotiations to re-enter either the Paris Accord or in really entirely new transaction on terms that are fair to the United States, its businesses, its workers, its people, its taxpayers. So we're getting out.
Trump justified the decision with wildly inaccurate claims and outright falsehoods, far too many to debunk here, misleading Americans on the treaty and its impacts on the United States. Withdrawal is a victory for the nationalist wing among Trump's White House advisors, and it's a victory for the fossil fuel industry's decades-long disinformation campaign to cast doubt on climate science. Renegotiating is a non-starter. The current agreement itself took 20 years, and France, Germany, and Italy, immediately after the speech, issued a joint statement declaring that the agreement cannot be renegotiated. The Paris exit has major long-term repercussions for our foreign relations, our global competitiveness, and, of course, pollution and the planet. Trump's formal exit will take at minimum 4 years, and the earliest it could take effect is November 4th, 2020, the day after the next presidential election.
That makes the next presidential election even more important than it might have already been.
An unusually broad spectrum of voices tried to convince Trump to stay in the global accord. Foreign leaders from Europe to the Pope to India to China warned Trump repeatedly that U.S. diplomatic relations will be severely damaged. One former White House official asked Politico, quote, "How will global leaders ever trust the U.S. again to keep our word as a nation?" Major corporations like Google, Apple, PG&E, Dow Chemical warned Trump that withdrawal will disadvantage America and its economy, hurt U.S. global competitiveness, and shut us out of global clean energy jobs. Even oil giants like Exxon and Chevron tried to convince Trump to stay in to, quote, keep a seat at the table. 70% of Americans wanted the U.S. to remain in the agreement, and that includes a majority of Republican voters.
Which is kind of amazing when you think about it and how disinformed they have been about climate over the years.
In the long term, U.S. withdrawal is hugely consequential for the planet. We're already seeing accelerating impacts like rising seas and deadly extreme weather events. A new analysis by the Associated Press projects that a rogue United States could add up to 1/3 of a degree Celsius of additional warming all by ourselves, meaning the world will have a far more difficult time avoiding dangerous and irreversible impacts of warming.
Which, of course, is just a tiny, tiny, tiny amount, as Donald Trump said today, as if it was completely meaningless.
Demonstrating he does not understand the science. The U.S. withdrawal could lead to backsliding among other nations, but leaders around the world affirmed their own country's commitments this week. The European Union and China on Friday will announce a new partnership on climate action, what the Financial Times called, quote, a stark realignment of forces. And states and cities are forging ahead with climate action, like California Governor Jerry Brown in an interview Wednesday with the LA Times.
California will do everything it can to not only stay the course, but to build more support in other states, other provinces, and with other countries.
So Trump can undermine the Paris Agreement, but he can't kill it. To be clear, the Paris Agreement targets were not enough to avoid catastrophic warming impacts. It was only a start, a framework. Trump's move is a major setback, but a future U.S. president can rejoin it. The Paris Agreement is a framework for transitioning to clean energy, and regardless of what Trump does, the market is moving away from fossil fuels.
And moving away from Donald Trump. This decision ends up hurting the nation as much or more than it hurts the planet, in truth. For much more on that story and all the ones that we couldn't get to at all today, check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your special coverage, Green News Report.
You're gonna keep on fooling around now, baby. You're gonna mess up a good thing. You're gonna mess up a good thing.
Now the lessons of the past we'll all learn with workers' blood. The mistakes of the bosses we must pay for. From the cities to the farmlands in trenches full of mud. 'Cause war has always been the boss's way, sir. Come on! The union forever defending our rights. Let's fight the right wing, our workers unite. With our brothers and our sisters from many far-off lands. There is power.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. Questions, comments, something on your mind, you can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. So for more than 3 weeks now, you've got graduate student teachers at Yale University who have been on a hunger strike. And I assume it's to raise awareness, gain some support for these grad workers who have been trying to join and form a union. And we've been seeing this all across the country as grad workers are saying, hey, we'd like some dignity, some respect, and maybe a decent wage to go along with that. And they've organized at Yale with Unite Here Local 33. And again, I got to imagine it's about recognizing their union. It's been a long fight, which is why I've asked Robin Canavan to come talk with us. She's Unite Here Local 33's co-chair, also a PhD candidate in geology and geophysics there at Yale. Robin, thanks for taking time for us.
Yeah, you bet. My pleasure.
So walk me through this. I mean, a hunger strike, fairly drastic. Why now?
Well, I should say it's not a hunger strike. It is a fast. It is a fast in response to the fact that Yale has been basically slow rolling us. They are not holding up their legal obligations right now. We actually won the right to sit down at the table with them. We won the rights to collectively bargain with the Columbia decision, and we petitioned for federally supervised NLRB secret ballot elections last fall. We had those elections in February. We won 8 of those 9 elections. We won the election in the Geology and Geophysics Department, the department that I work in. And now Yale is refusing to sit down with us and negotiate, even though the law says they should.
Right. Now, you said you won 8 of the 9. What is, because one of the things that I've seen come out of their statement is that, this you guys are just a small portion of this, and that you shouldn't have the right based on you're only a portion of the workforce.
Right. Well, so we decided to organize the union based on how our work is organized. Our work differs very much department by department, and we teach department by department. So I teach classes in the Geology and Geophysics Department. I'm not trained, nor do I have expertise to teach an English class. So for that reason, we want to negotiate contracts department by department. And so for that reason, we decided to vote department by department so that the departments that do want to be in the union can, and the departments that don't have to be.
It makes sense. I mean, because I would have to argue, and maybe you know better than I do, but I'm sure they've got different unions and different classifications of workers doing different tasks throughout the university right now, don't they?
Exactly. So Local 33 represents all the graduate teachers. with separate departments. But there are, longstanding labor relations that Yale has had with Local 34 and Local 35. 34 are the clerical technical workers. So they're people we see every day, our registrars, our, accounts managers that help in our departments for the clerical technical work. And then 35 are, the culinary, the grounds, the maintenance workers on campus. And yeah, exactly. So the type of work we do is very different, and the type of work we do, teaching work we do, department by department, is very different.
Yeah, and all about sitting down and negotiating is simply doing what I say every employer and employee should do: is sit down and know what each side expects from each side. Understand what the wages, hours, conditions, all of that is. It seems fairly simple, fairly cut and dry to me, and something I would think not only you as an employee would want, but them as an employer would want, so that everybody's on the same page.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think, I've fasted for 10 days because as a woman scientist, I think the other very obvious thing to me is with a union, we have a grievance procedure to deal with sexism and sexual harassment. Yale has said that they know it's a problem. In their own study, 54% of graduate and professional students said they've experienced sexual harassment. So they know it's a problem. And all we're saying is, hey, we think a union would help solve this problem, so let's sit down and talk about it. It's a very reasonable request, and the law is on our side, and they're still refusing to do it.
Well, the law's on your side for now, and I have to imagine that the university is stalling and dragging their feet long enough for the Trump administration to put in a bunch of anti-worker folks on the NLRB and throughout the country in different areas that make these decisions so that they can overturn this, no?
Yes, exactly. And that is why this is so pressing to me and to many of my friends and colleagues in the union, because, I think the fact that Trump is president is affecting a lot of us in a lot of different ways. But as you say, in this particular, there are 2 vacancies on the federal NLRB, and Yale is definitely using that to their advantage. And it's really disappointing because they are one of the top research institutions in the country. They're one of the top teaching institutions, and they pride themselves. I mean, part of the reason I came here, right, is it's this bastion of liberal thinking and free thought, and yet they're aligning themselves with Trump in this moment, and it's very disappointing.
It is disappointing, but here's the thing. I mean, their argument, as I understand, another part of it is that you're not employees, and I think there are people in our society who look at you as your students. You shouldn't be employees, and you should, I had to go through it, and so should you.
Yeah. Well, what I usually say to that is we are students and we are employees. We're both. And that is what the federal NLRB ruled last August, that we are both. I don't see why you can't learn on the job. And, I would also point out that there have been graduate student teacher unions at public universities for decades. I had friends at the University of Washington in their earth science department, and they have a union. They're a great research institution still, and I don't see why Yale can't continue to be a wonderful institution with, its wonderful reputation that it has, and still have a great relationship with its unionized graduate teachers.
Yeah. As I always say, there are people who say, well, we don't need any unions. And it's true. If you're a decent employer, if you do the right thing, if you treat people right, you probably don't need a union. But it sounds like, and from things that I've read, that not so much. They're not treating you right. You've got all this harassment on the job. You've got all these problems. And it seems to me that this should be a wake-up call for the administration to want to deal with that. And I think a good way to do that is sit down and negotiate. It seems too simple for me.
Yeah, no, it really is a very simple request. I mean, when I was on FAST, we were at our occupation 33 Wall Street, which our union and allies from the community and Local 34 and 35 helped put up the morning of the first day of our fast. We've been encamped at this encampment ever since. The fasters who have continued to fast forward are still there. We've had teach-ins there. We've had meetings. We've had, spontaneous conversations that would never happen with clergy from the community, with high school students visiting us, and all this outpouring of support right in front of President Salave's office every day. And he walks by. He can barely look at us. He knows where we're at. We're ready. We're not going away until they're ready to sit down with us.
Yeah. So let me ask you that, because that was one of the questions. What kind of support are you getting from the community? Because some of the reports that I've read, there's been you got a couple of arrests for blocking traffic. You've got a giant metal 33. There's a lot of stuff going on that is meant to elicit a response. I'm curious what kind of responses you're getting.
We're getting very little response, unfortunately. We have gotten a ton of outreach from allies. It's been really inspiring to have friends from undergrad or high school or total strangers who are graduate teachers elsewhere, or people who are adjunct faculty or lecturers, also similarly precarious academic laborers across the country, reaching out to us, responding to our op-eds or things they hear on Facebook and social media. We've had clergy who are really inspired by the fast and by what we're trying to do to make Yale, the best it can be and a better neighbor in the city of New Haven. Faculty and students and undergrads. We had over 1,000 Yale undergrads sign a letter in support of the fast. But unfortunately, the Yale administration has very much stayed silent. They had the head of student health come visit us twice during our fast to see how we were doing. In the midst, I was actually in the middle of a checkup from a nurse who was volunteering her time to make sure we were okay. It was a little upsetting that they're supposedly so concerned for our health, but yet not willing to respect us enough to sit down with us and talk about improvements we want to see in our healthcare.
It sounds very patriarchal. I mean, and again, I go back to this. It's obviously not about money, because Yale University has one of the largest endowments in the country. So it's obviously not about dollars and cents. It seems to me about power.
Exactly. I would agree with you. I mean, they have hired Proskauer Rose, a very well-known union-busting law firm. And I would only imagine that the amount of money they've spent on that, we could have settled our contracts basically at this point for the same amount of money, I imagine.
Yeah, they could have probably bought you off for that. So last question I've got for you. What can we do to help? What do our listeners do? What would help move this along? Because, look, I'm a firm believer that every person who works in this country should have a union contract. You should sit down with your employer. You should bargain. Both sides should know what to expect from the other. It just seems sane and rational. But what can I do? What can we do?
Yeah, and well, I guess just keep talking with each other about what you think is right, and reaching out to us. We've been, circulating petitions through MoveOn.org and other solidarity statements. We're having allies come join us on commencement on Monday in support to join us in holding Yale accountable to actually following the law and sitting down to negotiate with us. So if people are nearby and want to come to New Haven, they're welcome to join us on commencement.
There you go. Or you can also follow them on Twitter at 33Unite here, or their website, local33.org. We'll get links at thericksmithshow.com. Robin, I appreciate you taking a little time, sharing your thoughts. Stay healthy, stay well, and, stay committed.
Yeah, thank you.
Great talking with you. Thanks so much, Robin Canavan. Again, you want to check out their website. We'll get a link at thericksmithshow.com. Quick break. Right back after this. This is The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
So desperate measures we explore, marching on the Capitol to lobby leaders for involvement. 3,000 people screaming out, "Where's our government?" Lawsuits and arraignments, members under company surveillance. Public divided, either they love us or they hate us. Profit billions off our back, and it's still not enough. They should have took into account that we never give up. We'll be here one day longer. One day longer. The people's voice is stronger. We work hard for our
world-class radio experience, where hard work, common sense, and rational thought are a reality. The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1998. That was the day GM workers in Flint, Michigan walked off the job. 9,200 workers with UAW locals 659 and 651 had shut down a company which at the time accounted for 1% of the country's economic output. Production at GM plants throughout the U.S., Canada, and Mexico all came to a screeching halt. Many noted that what began as a localized walkout became the most significant strike against GM since 1970. Management had moved dies out of the metal center and shipped them to operations in Canada. In an act of international solidarity, brothers and sisters in the CAW refused to handle the dies. The 7-week strike was solid against a Wall Street attack on one of the last closed shops in the country. The strike was also popular with auto workers elsewhere, who confronted assembly line speed up, mandatory overtime, and the constant fear of plant closures. It inspired GM workers in Indiana, Ohio, and California to also go on strike. Even workers at the Tennessee-based Saturn plant, touted as a model of labor management relations, voted to strike in response to threatened outsourcing. But the strike essentially ended in a standoff. The union had stopped GM from closing plants in Flint and Dayton, Ohio, at least for a while, and GM agreed to invest millions in modernizing the Flint facilities. But weeks after the strike ended, GM bosses avowed more union-busting attacks. They declared a two-pronged strategy. First, they intended to spin off the Delphi Parts Division as an independent operation. Then, GM announced they planned to close existing U.S. plants in favor of new facilities that assembled pre-made parts fabricated at non-union suppliers. The war against the UAW had begun. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
Making the blue blood see red. The Rick Smith Show.
Fascists, you may be surprised. People all over this world are getting organized. You're bound to lose. You fascists are bound to lose.
So in the Trump administration's war on anything Obama did, one of the things that they tried to do at the end of the Obama term was to increase the minimum levels of liability. And I know this gets a little into the weeds, but it's another one of those things that government needs to do. It's another one of those safeguards, those moments where you put a floor underneath things. The reality is the Obama administration tried to do what hasn't been done since, I think, the middle 80s, and that was to raise the minimum level of liability insurance coverage that motor carriers in the country have to carry. Now, the Chamber of Commerce, the trucking associations, all of that, no, it's horrible, having to have a reasonable amount of insurance in the event that catastrophe happens. No, can't have that. We'll put that burden on society. Well, the Trump administration is withdrawing the raising of the minimum, which means right now a truck wheeling down the road has about $750,000 worth of insurance. And you go, wow, that's an awful lot. And you go, it's a lot. But understand, they can cause an awful lot of havoc. And I go back and I think of what happened here in Harrisburg, a couple years ago, and in Atlanta not too long ago, where, a truck rolled over, a gas truck exploded, and in Harrisburg, the bridge melted. And you had to replace the entire section of bridge. Now, I don't know about you, but I haven't really priced out the replacement of an entire section of bridge, but I gotta think that it's more than $750,000. In fact, most insurance, I'm told that most trucking companies carry $1 million liability. So here's the interesting part. And this is where the Trucking Association makes the argument without really knowing it that it should be raised. They said that the $750,000 level is fine. that most trucking companies carry well above that. Everyone carries at least a minimum of $1 million. So you go, okay, if that's the case, then you wouldn't have a problem raising it to at least $1 million. No. We can't do that because we want low road actors. And then we want society, you, me, us, to foot and shoulder what happens, the external costs of having these low barriers. We get to pick up because understand the trucking company that the guy rolled the truck over and the gas melted the bridge. The insurance company paid $1 million. The company went out of business, and the taxpayers were left footing the bill. Again, I haven't priced out a bridge, but I got to think it's worth more than $1 million. So just kind of a thought. Also, finally, today's day of action, the thing that you got to do today. We reach out to the Trump administration. Right now there's a comment period going on for the renegotiation of NAFTA. And I've been saying for a long time, this is not a bad thing. Not a bad thing. If we're going to renegotiate, we should really look at a couple of things. And one of them being the investor state dispute settlement system that's been set up. This idea that multinational corporations get to choose their judges in these secret tribunals to try cases against our government and our laws is ridiculous and has to stop. The idea that we pursue the concept and the theory of least restrictive trade barrier, I think is really important, because what it means is that if we're going to have trade policy with anyone around the world, this concept is fully entrenched in NAFTA and in everything that we do. And that's a race to the bottom. That's destructive for working people. Your workers in this country, and the reason the anger is here is because for so long, these trade policies have destroyed jobs in this country. And I despise the liberal elitist view who says, no, we need to embrace the world and raise everybody up and big open arms. And we're a rich country. We can afford this. No, we can't. If you're going to be a powerful country, you need to be a manufacturing country. You need to have know-how. You need to have the ability and the skill to be able to build stuff. And we're losing that. We're losing that competitive entrepreneurial edge that comes with tinkerers and people who actually work with their hands. That's scary stuff to me. So you've got time, reach out, and we will talk about this throughout the week, because I think this is, again, one of those really important moments. Love to hear your thoughts about what you heard today on the program. Something got your attention, something made you mad, something you agreed with. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. If you missed any portion of today's show, thericksmithshow.com. That's where you go to get the podcast. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll see you back here tomorrow.
It's coming from the wind. You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Together, we can make America better. Email rick@thericksmithshow.com or interact with us anytime at thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
It's coming like the tidal flood beneath the lunar sway. Imperial, mysterious, in amorous array. Democracy is coming to the